Hi, it's Barb from barbgrant.com, your change success coach. Doing the first of a series of video blogs reviewing a change management relevant book that I've read. So at the beginning of the year I decided that I would see if I could read a book a week as an experiment for the year. So far so good. Wouldn't say that I've managed 4 in a month, but I think I'm probably around 3, which is great news because we should work on measuring the gain and not the gap, meaning that's probably 3 more books than I would have read otherwise if I hadn't set the goal. So the first book I'm going to review is this book here. This is Daniel Goleman's Emotional Intelligence, which is considered, when it comes to emotional intelligence, one of the primary works. So what's the big idea in this work? It's essentially that it's our emotional intelligence rather than our IQ or our intelligence quotient which is the greatest predictor of future success. And that applies across the board. So in early childhood development, later higher education, our work career, and our home and family life, it's actually our emotional intelligence that is the better predictor of success in all of those spheres of experience. Goleman quotes an enormous amount of fascinating studies and research to back up his statements, and I found that he actually mixed in those elements really, really well. This is actually a pretty meaty or dense book in terms of the information that's presented, but because of the way he mixes it up and provides a blend of facts, his personal experiences and storytelling, I found that it was actually a pretty easy read to get through, and I managed to stick to my guns and get at least a half hour of the book read, if not more, every day. In terms of that research, some of the more fascinating studies speak to what is at the nub of this notion that it's actually our emotional intelligence that counts more than IQ. So within emotional intelligence, of all of the constituent parts of the idea or the concept of emotional intelligence, the 2 most critical factors are actually our resilience and optimism. So he quotes some fascinating research from Seligman, which shows that when it comes to insurance salespeople in their first year, the more optimistic salespeople actually sell 37% more insurance than those that tend to pessimism, which is pretty staggering research really, or a staggering differential in terms of performance when it comes to the selling of insurance. There's also quite a lot to show that hope is the most essential quality when it comes to success in the first year at university. So the students, regardless of what's going on in terms of their cognitive functions, who are more inclined towards a hopeful attitude, they actually outperform any other quality or the ones who maybe demonstrate more intellectual ability. And so Goleman is identifying that really when it comes to superpowers, or what he refers to as a meta ability, emotional intelligence is the most critical factor of all. One of the other big takeouts from the book is the idea that in many ways one of the big keys to having a successful life is learning how to manage your amygdala. So in terms of some of the fascinating research in the book that relates to brain function and neuroscience, I actually found that that was probably the most interesting little takeout of all, which was that when we receive stimuli, that is fed through to the neocortex, who basically makes sense and processes that reality, and that seat of function in the brain is at the back. But there's actually a bypass which is to the amygdala, which is one of the more ancient parts of the brain, and that is the feeling center of the brain. So the amygdala is all about feeling, and the feeling trumps the cognitive processing of the experience. So that's why people get into situations where husbands or wives can shoot partners and their lovers, why a boy in a playground who feels threatened by two friends that he's fallen out with can take a pistol to school and shoot them dead in a playground. So it's about that red rage moment, and when that red rage or red haze descends on us, that we were completely cut off from that rationalizing, analyzing function in the neocortex, and we're all about the amygdala. The amygdala is in the driver's seat, and we're not actually acting from a place of self-awareness. And the other pieces, which I also thought was fascinating, is that our ability to be empathetic with others, so empathy, is cut off once we get into that red haze. So once we get into a state where the amygdala is overloaded. One of the other more interesting pieces around that idea of there's a bypass from stimuli straight to the amygdala and to our feeling response to what we're experiencing is that it can become overloaded. So if we don't have decompression periods when we let the amygdala basically calm down, then we get to that point of hypersensitivity when the amygdala becomes overstimulated, and our ability to check or temper our responsiveness to stimuli in some kind of explosive way is greatly impeded. So excess stimulation of the amygdala means that we are completely cut off from our calm, rational processing centres in the brain, and we're in a state of overwhelm. That's why the skills that Goleman goes on to identify at the close of the book are so essential. These are the essential life skills, he's saying, that manage that emotional intelligence state that we're in and give us access to better, calmer, and more informed basis from which to make decisions. So the skills that he's talking about are the ability to work on self-awareness and actually be able to identify and name the emotions that we're experiencing, and also to temper or decompress from those emotions and take time to have that breathing space to just get out of that state of high reactivity and actually have a moment of thoughtfulness around what we're experiencing before we act. This idea that if we're overstimulated by experiences and we keep triggering the amygdala, that we can get into that state of hypersensitivity is also profound in terms of his findings about depression. So in essence, what he's saying around depression is that the more we get into a depressed state, the more we get into a depressed state. So there's an amount of research in the book that relates to the fact that people become primed for depression. So the more events that they have in their life, particularly in some close sequence, they make them depressed, and if they don't actually find a way to temper that balance and moved into a state of optimism, then I think we're all aware sort of anecdotally, and the research in this book backs it up, that people move into a deeper state of depression. When Goleman talks about those fully functioning adults, he's talking about people who can demonstrate and quickly access the qualities of resilience, cooperation and creativity in a complex world. The book is quite meaty and dense, but it's definitely well worth the read and extremely compelling in terms of the sheer body and volume of the research that it quotes. At the conclusion, it has a really extensive section of appendices which notate all of the research presented in the book. In change coaching, the idea of emotional intelligence is now pretty ubiquitous. You hear it all the time. It's interesting to note that which is one of those sort of fundamental textbooks or reference points for the idea of emotional intelligence, was written in 2005, which isn't really that long ago. So this is a cornerstone work in the field. I'm extremely pleased that now I can be in the know when people reference this work. It's something I've actually had slight guilt about not having read for a few years, so I'm really pleased that I've got to it. If you're interested in anything to do with human behaviour, psychology, what motivates us to do what we do or not do what we should do, then this is really definitely a must read, and that body of research and the proof of the pudding and all of the research that he quotes is extremely compelling. It's impacted me enough that now I'm actively working and thinking every day about how I'm managing my amygdala, not always with total success, but definitely a skill that I think we all need to cultivate. So that was the first in my series of change relevant book reviews. This was Daniel Goleman's Emotional Intelligence. I hope you enjoyed my sense of what the key takeouts from the book are. It is a book that I definitely would highly recommend. And next time I am going to either review two books that I've read in the first couple of months of the year, and they are Sean Acor's The Happiness Advantage or Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. So if you have any preference as to what you might hear a short review of next, please let me know below in the comments. And thanks very much for your time watching, and I hope to see you again for my next book review from Barb Grant from barbgrant.com, your change success coach.